Today's daf is Masechta Menachos Daf Yud Tes. Um, Daf Yud Tes. So we will begin from Daf Yud Zayin Yud Chesam and Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. So we learned yesterday there's a machlekes in Reb Shimon and Rabbanim. I think in this Masechta we find often the machlekes between Reb Shimon and Rabbanim, and it concerns itself regarding the concerns itself regarding certain parts of the Korban Mincha, which we discussed yesterday, which has to be done by a kohen. Here it is. We learned yesterday regarding the preparation of the mincha, the bila of the mincha, the yitzika of the mincha. This is part of the preparation before you do the hagasha. So the hagasha, of course, has to be done by a kohen. The kamitza has to be done by a kohen. But what about all this? Pouring the oil, mixing the oil, etc. The preparation of the mincha. So the Mishnah said that it can be done by a zar. Yitzika could be done by a non-kohen. So we said our Mishnah does not go according to Rab Shimon, because Rab Shimon says that the Yitzika has to be done by a kohen. So now the Gemara wants to understand what this machlekes is all about. So here we go. My taimid rabbanim. So the Gemara begins. What is the reason of the rabbanim that says that it can be done by a non-kohen? Omakra, because the pasuk says regarding the mincha, Omakra, b'yotzik aleh shemen. First you pour a little oil, then you put the frankincense, the elvia, and then you bring it el bnei Aharon to hakoyanim, to bring it to the sons of Aharon who are kohanim. The kametz, and they do the kamitza. So what do we see from there? From after the kamitza and onwards, there's a mitzvah to use a kohen. Limed that teaches us al yitzika ubelila sheksher v'zah, the avodah, a preparation of yitzika, pouring the oil, mixing the dough with the oil. That's kosher. That's kosher with a non-kohen. Rab Shimon. How does Rab Shimon know that the yitzika and belila should be kosher only with a kohen? Because it says b'nei Aharon hakohen. And it says vikamatz. You bring it to the kaim, and he does the kamitza. But you could also read the pasuk v'nasan le'levoina. Who does that? Bnei Aharon kohen. So you can read the pasuk backwards and forwards. So that's how Reb Shimon's going to read the pasuk. Bnei Aharon hakoyanim mikra nidrush lefonav l'achrav. We go to your Testament Aleph that the pasuk is darshaned frontwards and backwards, and therefore you could read it as if the Torah is already telling you that when you do the Yitzika and Belila, you should use a kohen. Says the Gemara, V'sava Reb Shimon, does Reb Shimon hold all over Mikra, Nitrash, Lefonav, L'achrav, that the pasuk is darshan backwards and forwards, Vatani, we learned in the Brisa, the kohen collects the blood of the chatas. So you shechted a female goat, and he collects the blood. The with his finger. It doesn't mean with his finger. He obviously collects it with a cup, but he holds the cup in his right hand. V'nosan al kanas mizbeach, and then he places it on the corners of the mizbeach with his finger. As we've seen the picture many times, when you do a katas, you the kohen sticks his hand into the cup and puts it on one of the corners of the mizbeach. So, so our Tanakama darshans mikra nidrash lefonav achrav. You could read it that the right hand and finger should only be used when you're doing the zrika on the mizbeach, not zrika, but the placing on the mizbeach has to be done with your hands. The Kabbalah perhaps could be done with your left hand. So because wherever it says be'etzbo, it means your right hand. So no, the Tanakama darshans lefonav la'achrav. So what do you learn from it? Be'etzbo v'lochav melamish shaloi tehei Kabbalah el b'yamin. That we learn from be'etzba'oi and take it with your finger means usually it goes backwards. That the Kabbalah should be only the collecting of the blood after you slaughter the animal should be done with the cup being held in your right hand. Be'etzba'oi v'nosan b'lamish shaloi tehei nusina el b'yamin. And you learn from be'etzba'oi and nosan that when you're placing it on the mizbeach, then you should use your right hand. But here's the key. Rab Shimon says no. The pasuk is yudarshan lefonav, and you don't go backwards. The chinema yad beKabbalah doesn't say the word be'etzba'oi when you does it say v'lokach be'espooi midama katas? Doesn't say that. So Rabbi Shimon, you don't go backwards. Kibo b'small kasher. Rabbi Shimon holds that if you caught the blood with your left hand, it's kosher. So Rabbi Shimon is the one that holds you don't go backwards. It's the Chachamim who hold you go backwards and forwards. So how could you say by kamitza, by the mincha, we read the pasuk, the indication of the pasuk that you need a kohen? According to Rabbi Shimon, you go backwards and forwards. The pasuk is interpreted that you go backwards. Abai explained the machlekes between Shimon and the Chachamim regarding collecting the blood with your left hand is: do you darshan the pasuk? Do you darshan when the Torah tells you use your right hand? That it goes it goes on the previous statement that was said. Shimon savad la'achrav nirdash l'fanav ein nidrash. So answers the Gemara. Bei mincha is different. Elhainu tamid Reb Shimon. The Gemara reverts and says that this is the reason of Rabbi Shimon. Shimon requires a kohen for the making of the mincha. Why? Because the pasuk says vehaviu. That means, where does the pasuk say vehaviu? Let's read the pasuk again. The pasuk says yotzak al shemen v'dasan al lavoyim vehavia, and you bring it. So the vav is a juxtaposition. That means the and, the Yitzika and Belila have the same din as the Kamitza. So there's an extra vav there that indicates they're connected. It's not like the Torah began a new pasuk. The Torah wanted you to connect the Kamitza to the Yitzika Belila, and that to darshan like this, that vav ma'asav ala in Yerishan, that just like the Kamitza is done with a kohen, so also the Yitzika and Belila is done with a kohen. Says the Gemara, if that logic is correct, then there's a pasuk that says, when you're shechting, let's say, a carbon oil, the Torah tells you anybody could shecht it, and the kehanim catch the blood and sprinkle it on the mizbeach. So makabala ve'elech, from catching the blood, mitzvahs kahuna. That teaches you that shechita is kosher with a non-kohen. But if Rab Shimon darshans vavs, so we should say the vav connects the shechita to the zrika and Kabbalah. Just like Kabbalah and zrika is with a kohen, shechita should only be done with a kohen. Rab Shimon, if Rab Shimon held of that logic, vav moisef al in Yerushin shechita hachaname bizarre tehei pesula. According to Rab Shimon, no kohen, a non-kohen should not be able to do the shechita. Answers the Gemara. The Gemara says like this: Shanu Hasam over there is different. By every shechita of a korban, it's different. Amakra, because the pasuk says v'shamach v'shacha, that the owner does leans his hands onto the animal v'shachat, and he shechs. Ma smicha bezarim, av shechit bezarim. That just like smicha is done with the owner of the korban, who could be a non-kohen, so also the slaughtering can be done with a non-kohen. Hima smicha b'balem. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, then we're going to have a problem with that. If that's your drasha, we're going to darshan imas smicha b'balam, just like the owner does smicha, af shchita b'balam. Then every owner has to learn shchita and how to slaughter his own animal, and that's not the case. You can make somebody else slaughter your animal, but if you're juxtaposing smicha to shchita, just like smicha, you can't have somebody else do the smicha for you if you're the owner of the animal. So also you can't have somebody else do the shechita for you if you're the owner of the animal. So again, we're back to square one. Answers the Gemara, Ahu lemotzas amar. That you cannot say, kal v'choima, because that the owner must do the shechita. Ma zrika the ika paraloi ba'alim, the zrika, the sprinkling of the blood on the mizbeach. Does that need the owner? Can't be the owner, because the owner cannot get next to the mizbeach. It's a kohen that does it. So shechita, the lav ika kabara, it's not the main kapara of the carbon. Like kolshkin, certainly it has to be done. It doesn't have to be done with the owner. That's not a good kal v'chayma. Chitema, you're going to say ain't done an afshar mishi'i afshar. How could you darshan something that could be done with the owner with something that's not going to be done with the owner? You can't have a kal v'chayma from zrika. Zrika cannot be done by the owner because the owner cannot go near the mizbeach. It's beyond his limitations. So therefore he doesn't do the shchita. But shchita, potentially he could do the shchita the owner could do the shechita. So why don't we learn v'samach v'shacha? You want to tell me that it teaches us that a non-kohen could do the shechita? Then by that token, it should teach me that that the owner should be doing the shechita just like the owner does the smicha. And says the Gemara, okay, the Gemara, Gali Rachman Yom Kippurim. Let's say the Torah revealed by the Korban Yom Kippurim, the Torah tells us about the Kohen Gadol, V'shachat es parachatas ashaloi. He does his own slaughtering. Machlal, from here you see, the Shechita Ba'alma Le'bina Ba'alim. Only in Yom Kippur, you need the owner of the carbon, shechting the carbon, which is the Kohen Gadol. But everywhere else, any other carbon does not mean that the owner of the carbon shech the carbon. Says the Gemara. Okay, so that's this. We sorted everything out. By Yitzika, Belila, Reb Shimon required you to have a kohen because behevia, because the Torah juxtaposes and connects the kamitza to the Yitzika and Belila. Just like the kamitza needs a kohen, the Yitzika and Belila need a kohen. Says the Gemara, Amarav, a new sugya. Kol makom shenema Torah v'chuka. Whenever the Torah will write the word Torah and Chukah, and then tell you a din by Kochim, Eina Elo Li'akev. That's just the Torah is telling you that this is necessary. So the Gemara continues, and the Gemara continues and says, Amarav Kamokam Shinema Torah v'Chuka Eina Elo Akav. Whenever the Torah writes the word Torah and Chuka, all the dinim that the Torah writes regarding that matter is la'akev. La'akev means that if you don't do it, then it's not kosher. In order for it to require that you can't skip a step, you need the Torah to tell you both words. Like by the paraduma, the Torah writes both words. Zois chukas haTorah. Then the Torah gives you the halachos of a carbon, the paraduma. So we know that you can't miss a step. If you miss the step, the paraduma is invalid because the Torah wrote both. Says the Gemara challenges that from following nititz yekamel. It's an abbreviation. Varei nazir, the loik siba be el Torah. The Torah wrote the word only by the halachas of a nazir. The Torah wrote the word Torah, but didn't write the word chukah. V'amarav tunufa benazim akva. That if you don't do the tunufa by the nazir's carbons, if you don't do the lifting, then the carbon is invalid. So, but it only wrote Torah; it didn't write chukah. So maybe you could leave out a part. Answers the Gemara, Shana Hasam, Kivan Diksiv Kain Yasa, Command Diksiva Be Chukah Dami. Since the Torah wrote Kain Yasa, this is the way it should be done. So it's as if it wrote Chukah. So Nazir really has both Torah and Chukah. Says the Gemara, Torah. The Diksiva Be Torah doesn't say Torah. The Elotar, the Diksiva Elotar. It says Zois Torah's Torah or whatever. It says the word Torah when it comes to the word when it comes to the carbon taida, which now we learned to the Mishnah, Aboa Shabbat taida, Ma'akvin Zeh Azeh. You need to have 4 different sets of breads, of matzah breads, 3 matzah breads, 1 chametz bread, when it comes to the taida. So why? But the Torah only wrote the word Torah, but didn't write chukah. Answers the Gemara, you're right, Shana Torah, taida, the iskash l'nazir. Taida, the Torah juxtaposes the carbon taida to the carbon of Nazir. And we already established that the Nazir, everything that the Nazir does, is ma'akev. Yiksiv, al-zevach koidash shlomev, v'hamamash shlomev, l'rabbi shalmi tzadeh. So shalmi Nazir. So we see that everything that the Torah wrote by the Torah wrote everything by a nazir, the carbon nazir, everything must be done. You can't leave it out, otherwise the carbon is possible. And since the Torah has a hekesh between the toida and the nazir, so there's a kashlama refers to nazir, so therefore toida has the same din of nazir, even though it doesn't have the word Torah or Torah and chuga. Says the Gemara, Bari Mitzayra. Let's take a look at the halachas of Mitzayra. Like Sibbe Elo Torah. It says only the word Torah by a Nazir. Where does it say the word Torah by a Nazir? Okay, I don't know. Zois Taras HaNazir, I guess. It says Zois Taras HaNazir, but it doesn't say Chukah by Nazir. Utnam, we learned in the Mishnah, you need to have the 4 parts to the Menzorah, the 8 errors, the Shnitelas, Ezev, and Siparim. And if you're missing that, the Menzorah is not rendered pure. And says the Gemara, Shani Hasan Ksiv Bey Zois Tia Taras Menzorah. Command the Ksiv Bey Chukah. Since it says this is the way it's supposed to be done of the Taras Menzorah, so here it says Torah, and Tia is like as if it says the word Chukah. So you have both words by the Menzorah. Says the Gemara, okay, you're going to tell me, again, the general rule is that you can't leave out a step in the procedure of something if the Torah wrote the parsha of that procedure and wrote the words Torah and Chukah when it wrote up the parsha of that procedure. Bariyam Kippurim, the Loksibe El Chukah. Utnan, it doesn't say, it only says the word Chukah by Yom Kippur. Right? Zois, this is the Zois, what does it say? So it says the word Chukah when it comes to Yom Kippur and Parshas Achri Mois. It doesn't say Torah. Utnan, we learned in the Mishnah, if you just have one goat, Shnei Sir Yom Kippur, if you can't do the Gara because you're missing one goat, then it's invalid. You can't just do one, you need to have both. So how did the Mishnah know that? Ella, it must be like this, that we have to revise what Rav says. You have either or. If it has either the word Torah or Chukah, then you can't leave out the step. Says the Gemara. Other karbonis, it says the word Torah, and it does, and we find that that there are parts to that it doesn't hold up the validity of the carbon. It says Zois Torahs Asham La'oila Lamincha, and we learned. Let's say you leave out the step of being makter the Amorim, right? If you leave out that step, it's still kosher. So we see that carbonis, even though it doesn't say it says the word Torah, and you said just by having the word Torah is enough. Yet we see by carbonis, if you leave out a step, it's the carbon is kosher. Answers the Gemara, Torah by chukah, v'chukah loy boya Torah. You're right. Torah alone is not enough. But if it says chukah, then you don't need the word Torah. So if the Torah wrote the word Torah, then you could leave out a step. If it wrote chukah, then you can't leave out a step. Says the Gemara, v'Torah v'chukah ka'amar. But didn't Rav says that if it says either or, Torah and chukah, you can't leave out a step. So the Gemara says, Hachi Kama, this is what we meant, this is what Rav meant to say. Even if the Torah wrote the word Torah, if the Torah writes chukah, and then you can't leave out a step. If the Torah didn't write along with the word Torah, the word chukah, then if you leave out a step, it's not going to invalidate the carbon. So again, the main word is chukah. Now we get to our question. Mincha, it says chukah, okay? V'omarav, where does it say chukah? Kol zochar b'vnei achar and yaklenu. Any kohen should be eating the mincha chak olam. And we just learned in our Mishnah, if you missed the step, you're kosher, right? V'omarav kol mokash avar mincha l'ksiv. So let's say like this. The Gemara asks a similar question. If the Torah said that step twice, then you can't leave it out. But it says the word chukah by mincha. So why do we require that the Torah has to repeat the step twice, like kmitza or whatever, that it has to be done? The fact that the Torah wrote chukah should be enough that it requires every step to be made. Hechser and loy hechser loy. If the Torah repeated it, yes, then and loy hechser. If the Torah did not repeat it, then it's not a step you could leave out. But according to Rav, once the Torah put the word chukah in that parsha, it should automatically say that you cannot leave out a step in the and in the mincha. And says the Gemara, Shani Hosam, over there, mincha is different. It says only the word chukah in the matter of eating the carbon mincha. But regarding the steps to make the carbon mincha, the Torah did not write the word chukah. And therefore, so we have to have another rule of thumb regarding the mincha, that only if the Torah repeated repeated what you're supposed to do, then you can't leave that step out. But if the Torah did not repeat it, so then you could leave the step out and it'll still be kosher. Says the Gemara, lechem upon when it says the word chukah, it says by the lechem upon him that the kohen is supposed to eat it, right? The Torah tells you that the kohen eat it in the azara. Me'ishe Hashem, this is a gift from God. Utnan, we learned in the Mishnah. Shnei Sudarim Ma'akvin Zazah, Ushnei Bezicha Ma'akvin Zazah, V'Sudarim Bezicha Ma'akvin Zazah. You need to have both groups of loaves, both Bezichim, and if you're missing them, then you can't eat, then the Lechem upon is invalid. But wait a second, the Torah did not repeat it, and the Torah wrote chukah regarding the eating of the Lechem upon him. So how do you know that if you're missing a step in preparing the shulchan, that it's invalid? So the Gemara now reverts and says like this: if the Torah wrote chukah, even if it wrote it by the eating, then it implies to every step of the process. And therefore, even though the Torah wrote the word chukah regarding lechem upon him by the eating of lechem upon him, it applies to all other parts of the lechem upon him, the bezichem and the both sets, and you need 12 and etc. But you can't miss a step. But so then, why by mincha you could miss steps? To Shan Hasim, because the Torah says by a mincha, the Amakra migir shah u'mashamna. The Torah says specifically from the kamitza and from its oil, from the groats and from its oil. So we darshan geras v'shemen ma'akvim, that you need gerish and shemen, the kamitza and the oil. They could hold up the validity of the mincha. But nothing else can hold up the validity of the mincha. But and even if the Torah repeated it, only gerish v'shemen have the power to invalidate the carbon mincha, nothing else. So bottom line is, the key word is chukah. It doesn't matter where the Torah wrote chukah. If the Torah wrote chukah by something, then every procedure must be done. If the Torah just wrote Torah, then you can leave out a step. And that's the basic rule that Rav gave. Gufa Amar Rav said, Kol Mokoin Shehichsa Lecha HaKosev B'Torah Mincha Eine Ela Akav. When the Torah repeated something by a mincha twice, then it's invalid if you don't do it. Ushmuel Ama, and Shmuel says, Garish v'shemen ma'akav ve'in dova acha ma'akav. Garish, anything to do with kmitza and the oil, that is ma'akav. Ve'in dova acha ma'akav. Says the Gemara, L'Shmuel, Afa be the Tanabe Kro Le Ma'akvele, even if the Torah repeats it, it's not going to hold it back. So I got to rephrase what I said before. Everybody should agree that if the Torah says something twice, the Torah is very serious about that item, and therefore it has to be done in that manner. So the Torah, if the Torah wrote, let's say, Yitzika twice, so you can't do without a Yitzika. You need to have Yitzika. Belila, the Torah didn't write it twice, so therefore you could skip the Belila process of a mincha. So that's Pashit, that 100%. What about other matters that the Torah didn't repeat? So then Gerish and Shemen are ma'akiv, nothing else. So, but according to Shmuel says Gerish and Shemen ma'akvim, but what about Yitzika, let's say? Would Shmuel agree that since the Torah repeated Yitzika twice, it's not Ma'akev? That doesn't make sense. Ella kol heich. So what is really the machlokes between Shmuel and Rav? Ella kol heicho disne beikra vade ma'akev. If the Torah wrote something, for sure, if the Torah wrote it twice, then you can't leave out a step. They're arguing on muloi kumtzei bikumtzei. In other words, the Torah tells you use your hand to do the kmitza. What happens if a person fashioned a measuring cup that's exactly his handful? Can you use it? The Tanya, we learned in a brisa, we know the pasuk had to tell us the Torah says, the Torah seems to imply, it changes the word that you can't make a measuring cup that's the same size as your hand. In one place it says Maloi kumtzai, and another place it says Bekumtzai, so you can't use a measuring cup. Rav says, Honami Tanabekra. So Rav says, how do I know that? And that you can't b'diavad kasha the mincha if you use the measuring cup. It says by the Meluim, they actually use their hand. So therefore, it was repeated. This story of using your hand to do the kmitza was repeated twice. Shmuel, Shtaris Mishal lo yafinim. You can't use that pasuk, Daris Mishal, and therefore, that was a one-time thing. So it's as if it's not repeated twice. And because of that, Shmuel holds that that it only says at one time in the Chumash that you can't use a measuring cup. This is the one time it says to use, you can't use a measuring cup. And then Rav says that the Torah tells a story by the Shivas Yimei Amaluyim that this is number two, that they did use a measuring, that they did not use a measuring cup, they used their hands. And Shmuel holds that's not called repeating because that was just a one-time story of the Shivas Yimei Maluim, but that's not like as if the Torah is repeating twice. You should only use your hands. And therefore, according to Shmuel, it only says one time, don't use a measuring cup. And therefore, if you b'diavad, you use the measuring cup, according to Shmuel, it didn't invalidate the carbon. If you use the measuring cup for the kmitza, it's not going to invalidate the carbon mincha, according to Shmuel. And that's what Shmuel means. Gersh v'shemen ma'akvim ve'in dova acha ma'akiv. Nothing else will hold up the kashrus of this mincha. Says the Gemara, the law yalav Shmuel daris misha. Does Shmuel not learn things that were written? Does not Shmuel learn things for the future, even if the Torah wrote the idea by a one-time situation? But now we learn to the Mishnah. Kli halach bekachenes halach midas yavish bekachenes yavish. So they were measuring cups in the Beis Hamikdash, holy measuring cups that one was used for liquid, so they could only make holy liquid items that are put in there, and a measuring cup that's only used for dry goods, so it could only be mekadesh dry goods, but it can't do the reverse. The liquid cup cannot be mekadesh dry goods, and the dry goods cannot be mekadesh liquid goods. Ben kli chalakach mekachenes yavish, like midas yavish mekachenes halach. V'yama Shmuel, and Shmuel says, loishna ella midos. This is only measuring cups of a mizrakos, a blood cup that was supposed to just catch the blood when you shech the carbon. Mekachin, it can be mekadesh, even not only liquid, but it can be mekadesh even a dry goods, because it's not really a measuring cup. And how do you see that? Iksiv, shneim, maleim, silas. The Torah tells you by the Nesiim, when they brought mizrakos, the blood cups, they filled it up with silas, with flour, and they made the flour holy. So we see Shmuel actually learns something that the Chanukah Sanesiim taught you a halacha for generations, even though that was a one-time thing. That a mizraka is an exception to all types of cups in the Beis Hamikdash, that even though it's generally geared for liquid, it can be mekadesh dry goods. And says the Gemara, Shani Hassam, over there it's different. Shmuel, the Kadabe Kra traces in. The Torah says this idea 12 times that the Mizrakos had flour in there. So already the Torah says, okay, the Mizrakos is the exception, even though Torah is discussing the one time 12 days where the Nesiim brought their inauguration carbons, but since the idea was repeated 12 times, so even in future generations, you can have even in future generations, you can have a mizukos be mekadesh, a dry good. So far, what do we know? We know that gerish and shemen are ma'akiv. And let me repeat what that means. Gerish, shemen means you can't use less than a lug of oil. Gerish means the amount of silas, isar and silas. That needs to be a certain share. You can't use less than that to make a mincha. So those are hold back, but nothing else is ma'akiv. So, if you miss a step, that's fine. The carbon mincha is kosher. And then we added that what happens, the halacha of the kmitza, can you use a measuring cup? The Torah tells you not to use a measuring cup. Even if you made a measuring cup the size of your hand, the Torah tells you not to use it. But Rav says that since the Torah repeated the story that they use their hands by the Shivas Yimei Amaluyim, so that's as if it's the Torah wrote it twice. So if you use a measuring cup, it's going to be possible. Shmuel holds that Doris Misha lo yalfidim. We don't learn something, a halacha for future generations, for something that was just a one-time thing that they brought the Shivas Yimei Hamiluim, they brought a mincha. So according to Shmuel, b'di'evid, if you use the measuring cup, the carbon mincha for the kmitza, the carbon mincha is not invalid. Now the Gemara says, Amalei Rav Kahana V'Ravasi L'Rav, V'harei Hagosha, the Tanabei Kra, V'loi Ma'akva, the Torah repeated the word Hagosha twice. The Torah says the word to bring it to the Mizbeach, okay? And what does it say that, so what is Hagosha? Hagosha is this part. Where the kohen just touches the prepared mincha to the wall, and he brings it to the southwest wall. Now, the Torah wrote that twice, and if you didn't do that, the mincha is kosher. If you just did the kmitza and that's it, you left out the Hagosha part, it's still kosher. And says the Gemara, so Rav answered, Mount Tanabe. Where did it say it twice? Being close. That's coming just to originally, what should you do? Where did you that the Torah is just trying to tell you exactly where to bring it. That means it should be on the west side of the Mizbeach. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa. Torah tells you, the Torah tells you, Tanya, the Tanya, it's not like it's saying it twice. It's telling you, you see, I would learn, Pashit, that the Torah says, Lifnei Hashem, El Pnei HaMizbeach. Bring it, touch it on the side of the Mizbeach, that's Lifnei Hashem, Mizbeach HaChitzoin, and also the front of the Mizbeach. So it's as if it said it twice. But that's not true. It's not saying it twice. But basically what the Pasuk is telling you, that you're supposed to touch the carbon, the mincha, on two different sides of the Mizbeach. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Lifnei Hashem, Torah wrote Lifnei Hashem Yochel B'Marav. I would think you got to put it on the west side. So let's take a look at the Mizbeach. Here's the Mizbeach. So I would think that you put it right over here. Let me put a red. You would put it right over here. But then the Torah tells you, all right, I think I have that. Yeah, then the Torah tells you, put it over here on Pnei, which is, I guess, the front of the Mizbeach. So how do you satisfy both? Pnei and facing the Mizbeach. So it's not like it's saying it twice. What the Torah is telling you, you have to put it right over here. right over here, which is the southwest corner of the Mizbeach. You see, southwest. This is west. So that's where you're supposed to do it. Yochel B'darim, I would think you do it in the south. Talmud Bavli Daf Yomi, do it in the west. Okay, Tzad, how do you resolve both psukim? Magisha, you touch Bekaren Droimis Maravis, Keneged Hudish Karen Vedaya. You bring it to a corner, the southwest corner, and that's enough. And that's clear. So it's not like the Torah is repeating it twice. The Torah is telling you in two different ways that's the point of where you're supposed to bring the carbon mincha. You're supposed to touch it, and therefore it's as if the Torah said this idea once, not twice. So if you leave out the hagasha, it is considered to be it doesn't invalidate the carbon mincha. It continues the Gemara. Rabbi Lazar says, Yochel Yagid. Rabbi Lazar says, Yochel Yagishan al Marava shel Karen or Lidroima shel Karen Lidroima shel Karen. Maybe you do either to the west or to the south. Amret Komokom Shatem Moitu Shtei Mekrois Echem Mekayim Atzmim Kaim Chaveira. Echem Mekayim Atzmim Batlas Chaveira. If I have two psukim that disagree with each other, in one, if I can interpret it, I can keep both in one way. If I can interpret it one way, I can satisfy both psukim. If I interpret it another way, I can satisfy one pasuk and nullify the other pasuk. So what do? You leave away the one that satisfies one direction and is mabatal the other, and the taifsin, and this is the way I should learn it. That one pasuk that can satisfy both. In other words, you try to fit in the psukim so that one pasuk doesn't look like it's contradicting the other pasuk. So you have to find a middle ground. So Rabbi Lazar is explaining himself, and you'll see where he argues. If you're going to say Lifnei Hashem in Marav, so be Talto Pnei Mizbech, then that's not the south, Badorim. When you say the south, Badorim, Kiyamta, then that's fine if you do it in the south, but Lifnei Hashem, Kiyamta. So Lifnei Hashem in Marav, how are you going to Mekayim it? So therefore, Rabbi Lazar says you also go to the southwest corner. Amar Ra. So what's the machlekes? What's the machlekes? Amar. So wait, no. So what Rabbi Lazar is saying, do it only to the west. Do it only to the south. And with the south, do it only to the south. Here's the point. Rabbi Lazar says you do it only to the south and not to the west. It's not a corner thing. You do it only to the south. But if I do it only to the south, then how do I get the Lifnei Hashem? So Omar Avashi Ksoba Haitana Kula Mizbeach B'Tzafin Kai. The entire Mizbeach was in the north. And here you have to see a picture, and that's where we'll end it. You see, Rabbi Lazar holds that if you do it only in the let's say in the west, so then if you do it only in the west, then you don't get the south, the Pnei HaMizbeach. But if you do it in the south, if you do it only in the south, you do get Lifnei Hashem. How do I get Lifnei Hashem? Because notice Rabbi Lazar's moved the Mizbeach over so that the south side is also Lifnei Hashem. So if you do it on the south, it's also as if you did it Lifnei Hashem. So Rabbi Lazar holds Lifnei Hashem teaches us that you do it only on the south side, and that the Mizbeach was moved over towards the center door of the Pesach HaHeichel, and therefore you mekayim both psukim. If I only did it on the west side, I wouldn't get Pnei Mizbeach. Rather, but the Chachamim hold the Mizbeach was the south side of Mizbeach was not Keneged Pesach HaHeichel. So if I did it on the south side, it's not Pesach HaHeichel, and if I did it on the west side, it's not the Pnei Mizbeach. So in order to accomplish both, I needed to do around this corner, which sort of is Pesach HaEichel and Pnei HaMizbeach. Bottom line is, but the point that the Gemara brought this out is that if you didn't do the Hagasha, it's also okay. Because it's not like the Torah is repeating it twice. The Torah is just telling you one idea, with two directions to that one idea. And therefore, since the Torah didn't repeat it twice, so that's how Rab answers the question that if you didn't do Hagasha, it's also okay because the Torah in reality did not repeat it twice. Okay, good Shabbos, everybody. So